All right, can you guys see a big screen that says Alaska's berries in a changing climate?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Awesome.
Thank you for sharing that, Krista. So I'll just go ahead and kick us off. Thank you for joining us. My name is Krista Herringa, and on behalf of the Alaska Tribal Resilience Learning Network, I would like to welcome you. And I want to just apologize right up front. I have my very infant son on my lap, so you'll probably hear some good background noise. The Alaska Tribal Resilience Learning Network is part of the Alaska Climate Adaptation Science Center, which is one of the 8 climate adaptation science centers around the country. Our offices are located at the International Arctic Research Center. And I would like to acknowledge that we live and work within the traditional territory of the Lower Tanana people who have stewarded this land since time immemorial. One of the goals of the Alaska Tribal Resilience Learning Network is to support opportunities for sharing experiences and knowledge among Alaska's diverse Indigenous communities that are on the front lines of climate change. So we are really grateful for the opportunity to co-host the Alaska's Berries in a Changing Climate listening session with Katie Spellman and Krista Mulder, both who are wonderful berry ecologists, and their team on the Alaska Berry Future Project. In an effort to leave as much time as possible to hear from all of you, I would like to turn it over to Katie to provide an overview behind the big goals for these listening sessions, and to Krista Mulder and Katie for a snapshot about what we know about berries in a changing climate today.
Thank you, Krista H. All right. Shift it over, Krista Mulder, Krista M.
All right, so I guess I'm on. You're sorry.
So
there we go.
Number one, thank you. It's so wonderful to get to see so many friends and berry enthusiasts gathered in one place. I know that many of you heard it from different networks and have different roles in your communities, but we all of us, I guarantee, love picking and eating berries. And so just welcome, especially welcome to the elders that are here with us today who have so much knowledge of berries, and I feel really special to have some elders in our midst today. You know, I'm a UAF scientist. I work at the International Arctic Research Center, and I grew up here in Fairbanks picking berries myself. Every year, my parents were teachers in Alaska, and berries meant a lot to me as a kid growing up here. And when I grew up, I became a berry scientist working with Dr. Mulder as her student. And we've been studying berries for a long time. And we realized that there's some disconnects between the research that goes on in Alaska and then the coordination of research with what we really need to know about berries in a changing climate. So our goal here is just to try to start a conversation about the issues and concerns that we have as Alaskans that pick berries in a changing climate. And we hope that this can be a first baby step to listening and sharing so that we can better coordinate our science with the climate adaptation and planning needs that we need to plan for berries in Alaska's future. I want my kids to be able to pick berries in the future. I know Krista H wants her kids to be able to pick berries in her future. And finally, we want to just make sure that whatever comes out of the Climate Adaptation Science Center and out of UAF, it is important, is relevant and serves Alaska and the decisions that we make about our resources in the future. So Melinda, do you have anything more to add here? I see you here. And I know Melinda is the leader of the Tribal Resilience Learning Network. And
yeah, well, great to see everybody. I'm glad to see such a representation of berry pickers and those who are concerned about the change on our land. No, I just think that it's really critical that you know, that when we have listening sessions, and there's definitely an opportunity in some of the projects and the work that all of you are doing at the community level or in the educational level, if you're working with students or other groups, that that we, looking at the variability that's happening across the state and the change that, anytime that, we can work together really to address, how to really cultivate what it's really critical. I think with the way both extreme weather is happening and also the impact of many things happening across the state, that it's just really important to share what you're comfortable sharing. And I'm really glad to see all of you here today. So Dogaden, and just for those of you who don't know, I'm the tribal liaison at the Alaska Climate Adaptation Science Center, so involved specifically in this project and also with the Learning Network. So welcome.
Thank you, Melinda. Right, Krista, let's go to the next slide. So we are noticing, you're probably in this meeting because you've been noticing things about berries yourself. I know I see Janelle Winter from Metlakatla in the climate adaptation plan that she worked to write with her community, included a lot of concern about changing berries in their community. We've noticed that berries are changing in variability and abundance and in the timing of our berries. And our work, Krista Mulder and I have been studying berries from a scientific perspective and eating berries my whole life, studying berries from a scientific perspective for over a decade now. And we are noticing the same things from all different evidence sources. Jerry Hupp, who worked at the USGS, the US Geologic Survey, he did a survey of the environmental coordinators from over 100 villages across Alaska and across the state. The survey showed that people are noticing increases in the variability of berries. And so the question is this related to climate change? Is it not? So Krista, let's go to the next picture there. So when you think about the life cycle of a berry, it's a miracle when a berry is born. Every phase of its life cycle, right? There's something that could become out of whack from a changing climate, from the bud phase all the way to producing fruit and getting ready for winter, for dormancy. So Krista's going to give us a really brief introduction to those life phases, and then we will divide up into some talking circles to talk about what we've noticed. And hopefully Krista's information can help seed us thinking about things that we might have been noticing about our berries in our places.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Krista Mulder. I'm a plant ecologist at UAF. I'm originally from the Netherlands. I have also been picking berries all of my life, although different berries depending on what part of the planet I happen to be living on. So I'm going to go through some of the kinds of things that can be affected and that can affect plants that might have to do with climate change. And there's lots and lots of research on each of these topics, thousands of papers. And what we're trying to do right now is pull together some of that information in a form that is understandable and useful to people. So these first two pictures are just to remind you or to let you know that berry plants actually don't start making berries the year that you can pick them. They actually start making them the year before. And these are a couple pictures of a low bush cranberry on the left and a high bush cranberry on the right. Those are the buds in the fall, the year before the plants flower. So they're already spent a whole summer building resources, and they decide whether they're going to flower, decide in quotation marks, depending on how much food they have in their larders. So how much carbon do they have and how much nitrogen they have. So conditions over several years actually matter. And then when it's time to flower, the single most important thing that's probably going to be happening is that they need to be pollinated. Most of our wild berries need pollination, or at least produce a lot more berries if they're pollinated. So here's a picture of a bumblebee and a swallowtail butterfly visiting some low bush cranberry flowers. So if the timing is off, if the plants are flowering before their pollinators are out, or the pollinators are out before the plants are flowering, then you've got a problem. Or if it's just bucketing down rain the whole time that they're flowering. So all those kinds of things, climate can affect it, a lack of pollinators in multiple ways. And then on the right here is a little picture of a poor little plant damaged because it got a layer of ice on it after it snowed. And that's to remind you that things like early snowmelt can actually affect flowering too, because buds are quite sensitive, especially late in the spring, to cold temperatures and to being iced over. So if you have a really early snow melt, there's no snow protecting the plants, and then the temperature drops very rapidly, you can end up with damaged buds. Another thing that can happen with climate change is that you can get changes in the pollinators, in the herbivores, the plants that eat the berry plants, and in the pathogens, things like fungi and bacteria. And I wanted to share with you some of these pictures because I think they're so cool. So on the upper left-hand corner, you might see something that some of you might have seen when you're out picking berries, and that is, it's a little low bush cranberry. It's got this weird pink structure on the top that looks like a flower. And that's actually a fungus that got in there and made the plant make a pretend flower that attracts insects. And instead of moving pollen around, they're going to move the spores from the fungi. So it's very tricky. These plants can be very, or the fungi can be very tricky. And then there's some other types of damage just to show you. And those can change if it's more moisture or warmer, or we're not really sure. That's probably one of the big gaps, those kinds of things. And then on the right is a high bush cranberry. And you can see the one in the middle there looks really disgusting. You wouldn't want to eat it. And we just finished a very large project called Winterberry, where people across the state collected data for us, for all of us, on when these fruits rot. And that paper is actually going to get published in January with everybody's names on it. So it's going to be very exciting. And then one more thing, at the landscape level, there can also be climate impacts. So many of you probably know that we're getting more frequent fires and more intense fires, wider spread, and fires in places that don't normally see fire, like tundra, which is a whole new thing. Shrubification, so shrubs like willows and alders showing up in places that were previously tundra, is another thing that some people are very concerned about, and has been documented across parts of the state. And then the thaw of permafrost can also influence berry habitats and potentially cause flooding. And there's other things as well. So all of those kinds of things can affect us. So it's really complicated to figure out exactly what's going to happen and what's going on. And that's what this project is all about, putting all of our minds together to try to figure this out. But we want to start by finding out what people are most concerned about and most want to know. And Katie, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Yeah. So because I love berries so much, I love this groove, whoever's got the groove going. I don't know if we can mute. Yeah, thanks. I like that song though. It was very jazzy. We've been thinking about berries a lot, and want to make sure that the science that's and observations from places like the Leo Network and from UAF, or all the different tribal offices and government offices, other government offices around the state that might have information about berries that could be shared. We're trying to figure out how that can serve us as we plan for the future, how that can serve all of us as we plan for the future. And so I looked at all the 29 published adaptation plans and risk assessments that had been done at the, as of last year. And I just looked for every mention of berries in all those plans and risk assessments. And we are concerned about berries, and especially the increasing variability and abundance. Close to 40% of the plans mention that as a concern. And then the precipitation and drought. I know Southeast Alaska talks about this a lot in the past years. But changing timing of precipitation and amount of precipitation, how is that influencing berries? That was a concern. And then the habitat changes are another big concern that we're thinking about as we're thinking about planning for the future. So today we're going to invite some talking circles in 3 breakout rooms. Krista, will you check out the next slide with some instructions? All right. So, you know, each of our ecoregions and really each of our communities has issues that are special to our community on berries. And as we've been working on berries with the 1,500 people that have been monitoring berries over the past 4 years with us, we have been hearing lots of stories that are important. And they kind of vary by the ecosystem. So we're going to go into 3 different rooms, a polar and tundra room. And we just use the names in the names that are the ecoregions of Alaska assessment had in it. But we have a polar and tundra room. So if your community or the community you feel most connected to is in this on this map right here for room 1, you're going to go to room 1, oh, and it looks like Molly opened the rooms. And so does that, you'll hover over that little join button. And if you are from Boreal and if you're in room 3, Krista, next slide, you'll hover over the little join and join when Krista, can you go to the next slide?
Yeah,
and questions that we will discuss is number 1, you'll introduce yourself, and if the group sizes are large, we might end up having to do that in the chat, but that'll be up to your host. Each room will have a host and a note taker already assigned. We'll take turns and make sure really that everyone gets a chance to speak. And in other listening sessions, you know, some people start to take over. So just be mindful. If you know yourself as a talker, then make sure you make space for others. And then we'll reflect mostly on question 1, which is what changes have you noticed or concerns do you have about berries? And if there's time, we'll move on to number 2 with a forward-thinking question. In my discussions with many of you, I know you're thinking about like the future and what can we do to adapt to the changes. And we'll join back in this main room at 1:50 and nominate someone to be the report back for that session. So right now we have the breakout rooms and they're getting started, and your host will join you in your room. So bipolar, it's any tundra community. So if you're YK Delta region, if you are affiliated with the tundra at all.
And Katie,
yeah.
Molly will be sending a message to the groups when we're ready to come back, and we'll do that right around 1:50. So we should have about 30 minutes in those breakout rooms.
All right.
just a quick question.